The first red flag wasn't the sudden 3:30 p.m. meeting invite from operations. It was that I wasn't on the guest list for Friday's all-hands summit. No calendar block, no Zoom link, no just checking in email from my manager. After 8 years, that kind of silence roars louder than any layoff announcement. When I walked into the conference room, they didn't even pretend to care. 3 people, Rick from finance, Angela from HR, and some kid I didn't recognize who looked like he'd just walked out of a data science boot camp. No greeting, no water, just a printed envelope already on the table like a death notice for my career. "Mandy," Angela started, tone flat, eyes darting away. "We truly appreciate your years of dedication. But due to cost reduction initiatives," Rick cut in, folding his hands like he was auditioning for a corporate villain role, "we've made the difficult decision to eliminate your position effective immediately." Eliminate. Like I was a budget line, a recurring expense, a leak in their precious balance sheet. I didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't ask what the severance was. I just looked at the intern, still trying to figure out where to place his hands, and asked, "Did you even look at the accounts I manage?" Rick blinked. "This wasn't personal, strictly financial. We're saving $150,000 this quarter alone. That's a win." A win. The envelope felt warm in my hand. I hadn't even opened it yet, and already I could feel the burn of betrayal rising through my chest. 8 years. 8 years of red-eye flights, holiday weekends sacrificed for quarterly closes, running client calls from emergency rooms and airport bathrooms. 8 years of making their top accounts feel seen, heard, and understood in a way their shiny CRM dashboards never could. And I was now just a cost-saving measure. I walked out with my back straight, badge already deactivated, and a strange silence echoing around me like I'd already been ghosted out of the building. But the real punch didn't land until I reached the lobby and heard them in the break room, laughing. Loud, free, open-mouthed laughter. "Cheers to Rick," someone shouted. "Saved the company $150,000 with one signature." Then someone else added, "Mandy'll be fine. She always looked like a yoga and journalism type. She'll probably start a podcast or something." Cue more laughter. I stood there for 5 seconds too long. Long enough to picture walking back in and slapping the manila envelope across Rick's smug face. But I didn't, because I already had what I needed. See, what Rick didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the expendable employee they just let go, she didn't just manage 38 high-value accounts. She was those accounts. Every renewal, every upsell, every out-of-scope request handled with a personal text, not a help ticket. I'd been the quiet glue holding those contracts together. Client retention, relationship architecture, renewal strategy, all of it. And inside that envelope, stapled behind the generic NDA and templated HR script, was my final gift. The client matrix. The one I built. The one only I knew how to interpret. It listed every contract, soft exit signal, personality note, escalation history, and billing rhythm. It was more than data. It was a map of pressure points, loyalty gaps, and decision makers they didn't even know they should be scared of. And the kicker? They'd included it, stapled it, right into the termination paperwork. No redactions, no watermark, no clue. As if I were just some administrator cleaning up back-end reports. Not the one who built the system they still relied on. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car, still in the parking garage, envelope open across the passenger seat like the aftermath of a quiet explosion. And I smiled. Not because I had a plan, not yet. But because when someone hands you a loaded weapon, gift-wrapped in legalese and printed on recycled paper, you don't scream. You wait. I looked down at the first tab in the matrix. Q4 at-risk clients. Next to it, needs weekly check-ins. Lost father last month. Mandy only contact he replies to. A note I'd typed just 3 weeks ago. Rick had no idea, but he would. This wasn't revenge. This was reckoning. And I had 48 hours before they even noticed the cracks. Just enough time to decide where to start. I didn't sleep that night. Not from anger, not from sadness, just stillness. That eerie silence that settles over you when your world tilts and you realize you're not panicking, you're recalculating. At 2:42 a.m., I opened my laptop and scrolled to a folder I hadn't touched in months. Client continuity. It wasn't company property. It was mine. Notes, reminders, draft emails, relationship audits. I'd kept it up out of habit, partly for insurance, partly because I never trusted that anyone else would bother remembering the little things. The important things. Like how Jessica W. from Langley Tech only signs contracts on Thursdays because of some weird superstition. Or how Michael C. at Blusky Energy refuses to do business with anyone who uses bullet points instead of numbered lists. Petty? Maybe. But those quirks were the glue that made them stay. And now I had time. I pulled out a notebook, a real one, paper and ink, and started listing names. Not clients, not contracts. People I'd built trust with. And people they'd handed over to Connor from sales. The same guy who once asked me what client sentiment meant in a meeting. By sunrise, the list was 19 names long, each one marked with 3 columns. Stability, how likely they were to renew. Personal tie, how deeply they were connected to me. Risk trigger, what might make them walk. Some had left subtle clues in recent weeks. Haven't heard from you in a while. Hope you're still our point of contact. Now I wasn't. But no one told them that. That morning, I took a walk around my block, watched a neighbor plant mums, listened to the breeze whistle through the trees. It was peaceful in the way only forced stillness can be. Then I went back inside, made black coffee, opened my laptop, and started composing the first message. Not a pitch, not even a hint of persuasion. Just, "Hi, Tony. Hope you're doing okay in the middle of Q4 chaos. Just wanted to say it's been a pleasure working with you over the years. Things have changed on my end, but I'm still cheering for your team. Take care and stay in touch. Mandy, no company logo. No forwarding address. Just the soft crack of a door being left open. I sent 5 versions like that. Different names, different touches, all heartfelt, all truthful." Then I waited. By mid-afternoon, the first reply landed. "Wait, what do you mean things have changed? Are you still our rep?" I let it sit for a beat, then typed, "I'm no longer with the company. No. I was informed of the restructure on Thursday. I didn't want to disappear without saying thank you. You've always been a favorite account of mine, Tony." Less than 5 minutes later, "I'm sorry. What?" No one told us anything. "We've got our annual planning call in 2 weeks. Who's taking it now?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Let the silence work. Because here's the thing no exec ever thinks about. Clients don't fire vendors. They fire people. And when the person they trust vanishes, they get nervous. They start looking. By the end of the day, I had 7 more replies. All versions of the same theme. What's going on? Why weren't we informed? Can you recommend someone else we can work with? One even said, "You made us feel like a priority. That's hard to replace." That one stuck. I didn't reach out to everyone, not yet. I wasn't trying to cause chaos. I was just reminding people I existed, and letting them ask the questions my old company didn't think to prepare for. By that evening, I'd heard from an old colleague too. Chloe. She was still on the inside. Quiet. Smart. Watching everything. Her message was short. "Hey, they're freaking out. 2 clients called today asking why you're gone. One left a voicemail asking if you're available directly." Rick looked like he swallowed a stapler. "I'll keep you posted. Stay quiet. This is fun." I didn't smile. Not yet. Because this wasn't revenge. Not exactly. It was something colder. Something slower. Erosion. And the cracks were just beginning to show. By Monday morning, my inbox was full. Not job offers. Yet. Not even contracts. Just questions from clients, from colleagues, from vendors who had no idea I was gone until the silence started creeping in like mold between walls. No goodbye email, no handoff, no out-of-office reply. Just gone. One message hit different. Mandy, your name is still on the internal access list for the vendor portal. Thought you'd want to know before they realize. Also, thank you for everything you did for our team over the years. You made things easier. We miss that already. That was from Lila, my contact at Halverson and Company. She used to call me the calm in the contract storm. Now she was stuck emailing someone named Trent. Trent, who once forwarded her the wrong Q3 report, addressed to a different client. I didn't respond, but I bookmarked the message. Meanwhile, back at the office I no longer belonged to, things were beginning to unravel. Chloe, my silent eyes on the inside, sent me another message around 10:27 a.m. Heads up. CFO's been pacing all morning. 3 account managers flagged churn risks in the last 24 hours. Someone said your name in the team meeting. Rick snapped a pen in half. It's starting. I imagined it vividly. The glass-walled conference room. The nervous glances. The rising temperature as they realized the $150,000 they saved might just cost them millions. The math was simple. They thought they were trimming fat. What they didn't understand was I wasn't fat. I was bone. I didn't just manage accounts. I anchored them. I remembered birthdays. I sent handwritten thank you notes. I tracked budget cycles and procurement quirks with the kind of detail their CRM system couldn't handle. They cut me out without a transition plan. No calls, no coverage, no continuity. And now? Now they were fumbling. At 1:13 p.m., I got another message. This one from a client who'd always been hard to read. Quiet. Private. Never used emojis, never replied right away. But this time? Mandy, we received your note. Thank you for everything. Honestly, without you there, we're unsure about next steps. Thinking of pressing pause until things stabilize. We'll keep you posted. They wouldn't. I knew they wouldn't. That was polite corporate language for we're shopping. I made tea, sat on the porch, let the autumn wind thread through my sleeves as I watched a neighbor rake leaves into a pile only for the wind to scatter them again. That was my old company now. Scrambling, sweeping, only to watch everything blow away. The next morning, Chloe messaged again, this time with urgency. Mandy, they're in full damage control. CMO just canceled a webinar to review client communications. Jenkins, the CEO, is demanding an emergency retention plan. Rick is blaming inadequate knowledge transfer, and Angela's trying to say you didn't give proper offboarding notes. Everyone's pointing fingers. It's a circus. A circus. One I'd performed in for nearly a decade. Now I was the ghost haunting the tent. At 3:44 p.m. it happened. The first official cancellation. I didn't hear it from them. I heard it from Tony, the same procurement lead I'd emailed 2 days earlier. Hey, just a heads up. We've decided not to move forward with Q4 after all. We're reassessing vendors. I'm sure you understand. Also, if you're ever available for consulting, I'd love to talk. He wasn't subtle, and he didn't need to be. Reassessing vendors, that's the phrase that makes executives sweat through their dry-cleaned blazers. And Tony wasn't alone. By dinner, 2 more clients had sent similar messages. They weren't mad. They were hesitant, unsettled. Because that's what happens when trust goes missing. Not overnight, not with an explosion. It's a slow leak, a series of, let's revisit this. We'll get back to you. Let's put a pin in that. And no one at the top knows where it started. But I did. It started when they celebrated cutting $150,000. It started when they popped champagne and toasted to efficiency. And now? Now the bubbles were gone and the glass was cracking. By Wednesday, the fallout was no longer quiet. 2 more clients had paused their Q4 planning sessions. A third requested a refund for a service bundle they claimed was no longer aligned with current expectations. Chloe, still feeding me updates from the inside, sent a message around noon. Jenkins just left the boardroom red in the face. CFO's blaming external interference. They're digging through your offboarding file now like it's a crime scene. HR is whispering about possible IP leaks. I didn't leak anything. I didn't have to. The thing about building trust over 8 years is it's not stored in a cloud drive or a Salesforce instance. It's stored in people. Conversations, eye contact during hard meetings, emails sent at 11:43 p.m. just to make someone's Monday easier. You can't transfer that with a checklist and a forwarding address. And now? They were realizing that too late. Still, I wasn't gloating. In fact, I was hesitating. I wasn't sure what I wanted next. I had options. At least 3 companies had reached out in the past 48 hours asking if I'd be open to freelance guidance or contract support. One of them even offered to send a retainer just to keep me around. But the thought of going back into corporate, just another cog, another team of executives who'd smile while gutting loyalty, made my stomach turn. So I did what I hadn't done in years. I closed my laptop, walked 2 blocks to the local library, found a quiet corner near the windows, and just sat. No phone, no Wi-Fi, just quiet. Somewhere outside, the world was moving fast. Panic emails, failed calls, escalations sent to the wrong inboxes. But here I breathed. I needed to be sure that I wasn't just reacting, that I was actually choosing. That evening, while making dinner, my phone rang. Unknown number, Cleveland area code. I almost didn't pick up, but something in me said, this is one of those moments. Hello? Silence at first, then a breath. Then, Mandy? I recognized the voice instantly. Eli Turner, head of strategy at Veritas Group, one of the fastest-growing consulting firms in the Northeast. We'd crossed paths years ago when my old company was trying to secure a mid-sized tech portfolio. He and I had spent 3 hours in a breakout session arguing over client segmentation strategies, and then bonded over terrible conference coffee. We hadn't spoken since. Mandy, he repeated, please tell me you're not tied up with another firm yet. I blinked. I'm in transition. Good. I've been hearing some noise, he said. Big names, too. Clients jumping, vendors scrambling. Every other sentence starts with, well, Mandy used to handle that, and ends with, now we don't know who to call. I said nothing. I don't usually chase people, he continued, but in this case, I'll make an exception. We've got clients in triage mode. They need steady hands. People who understand more than deliverables and KP is, people who can see around corners. Still, I didn't speak. I'm not offering you a job, he added. Not unless you want one, but I'm offering a platform. Build something here. Consulting, strategy, client reactivation, whatever you want. Total freedom, competitive equity, remote, no red tape, just bring your brain. He paused. I won't ask for an answer right now, but just know, we don't treat legacy like dead weight. We build on it. I sat there, phone warm against my ear, his words hanging like smoke in a quiet kitchen. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't validation. It was a door, one I never expected to open. Send me something, I said finally. Outline, in terms, I'll think about it. You got it, he said. And Mandy? Yeah? They made a mistake, a big one. We've known that for years. When I hung up, I didn't dance or cry or scream. I just stood there, quietly stirring the pasta in the pot, letting the steam rise. The funny thing about being discarded, it makes you remember what you're made of. And slowly, so very slowly, I started to feel it again. Not anger, not pride, clarity. Because now I had what they never gave me. A choice. And that, more than any title, bonus, or office view, is power. By Thursday morning, everything was quiet on the outside. No more LinkedIn messages, no texts from clients. Even Chloe hadn't sent a whisper from inside HQ. I figured either they were patching the leaks, or the ship was taking on water faster than anyone could speak. I'd spent the night reviewing the consulting proposal from Eli Turner at Veritas Group. It was smart, flexible, generous. No corporate fluff. No titles or structures designed to box me in. Just resources, autonomy, and room to build something meaningful. I hadn't signed yet, but I knew I would. Not for the money, not for the title, because it aligned with something I'd almost forgotten I needed. Respect. Still, I hadn't reached out to any clients since Monday. I didn't need to. Because by now, they were reaching out to each other. That's how it works. One procurement lead vents to another. A passing comment during a conference call. Have you noticed something weird? Email chain. Suddenly, everyone's asking the same question. Where's Mandy? At 10:08 a.m., I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. Mandy Thompson? Yes. This is Dana from Avery Capital. You used to handle our quarterly reporting at your old firm? I remember. How can I help? There was a pause. Then she said it. Blunt, tired, and completely honest. We want out. We're not getting answers. The reporting's late. The replacement team doesn't understand our workflow, and our COO's losing patience. You made it work. You got us. Is there any way we can work with you directly again? And just like that, it began. I didn't promise anything. I told her I'd forward her contact to Veritas and that someone would be in touch. I stayed vague, professional, careful. But when I hung up, something in me shifted. Not because of the call itself, because of what it meant. They didn't just notice I was gone. They felt it. And that, more than anything, confirmed what I already suspected. They hadn't fired a position. They'd amputated a connection. At 11:03 a.m., Chloe finally messaged me again. Okay, now it's a mess. Avery Capital just pulled their Q4 project. CFO is demanding to know how many more might follow. Marketing is in lockdown. Legal's reviewing your termination paperwork to see if they can claim IP infringement. But there's nothing. You didn't take anything. They gave it to you. Also just overheard Jenkins say, find out what she's doing. And where. I sipped my coffee, eyes on the window, watching a squirrel dig into a planter outside. He looked frantic, clueless, just like Rick from finance probably did right now. They'd given me Exhibit A, my own client matrix. They stapled it to my severance packet and called it offboarding. They didn't watermark it, didn't password protect it, didn't redact a thing. And now? Now they were trying to stuff the genie back in the bottle. Too late. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table and started a list. Not of clients this time. Of consequences. Every time I'd been asked to stay late without acknowledgement. Every promotion I was in the running for that never came. Every time they used my work in a pitch without my name on it. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. And clarity, I've learned, is dangerous in the hands of someone who's been quiet for too long. At 4:32 p.m., Chloe sent one last message before logging off for the day. Emergency meeting tomorrow. Full executive team. Subject line just says, client retention and immediate risk response. Jenkins looked like he hadn't slept. Rick canceled his trip to Chicago. They're scrambling, Mandy. One of the VPs called your departure a strategic blind spot. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because what they called a blind spot had always been their choice. They didn't see me because they chose not to. And now, without warning, the space I once filled was echoing. Not because I was loud, but because I had mattered more than they were willing to admit. Until now. Friday started quiet. I brewed my usual cup of tea. Earl Grey, no sugar, just heat. I didn't check the news. Didn't scroll social media. Didn't even touch my email at first. Because when you know the storm's already coming, There's no need to chase the thunder. At 9:06 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number, my old area code. I knew who it was before I answered. Hello? A pause. Just breathing. Then, Mandy. His voice was taut, strained. The kind of voice a man uses when he's trying to sound calm but already knows he's lost control. It was Jenkins, the CEO. I didn't say anything. Just let the silence hang. I just got out of an emergency board meeting, he said. We're trying to get a handle on some unexpected developments. Several key accounts are... He hesitated, searching for the right phrase. Reevaluating their contracts. I stayed quiet. He continued. We've been told you've had contact with some of these clients. I have, I said flatly. I sent a few messages, just thank you notes. Nothing more. Well, it seems those notes stirred up some confusion. His voice tightened. Clients are saying they didn't know you were let go. Some have even assumed we were being dishonest. Were you? I asked. He didn't answer that, just exhaled hard. We need to clarify the nature of those communications and retrieve any materials you may have taken with you. There's nothing to retrieve, Jenkins, I said. You handed it to me. Exhibit A, stapled right into the severance packet. Do you remember? A beat, then quieter. That was internal documentation. It was my work, I said. My notes, my system. You never protected it. You didn't even watermark the printout. You just called it Exhibit A and shoved it in an envelope. Mandy, look, he said, his voice cracking under pressure. We're dealing with real losses. Contracts falling through. Clients ghosting us. People are talking. Vendors, partners, even competitors. This could spiral. It already has, I said. He went quiet, then asked, almost pleading, What the hell did you do? I took a sip of my tea. I did what you should have done, I said. I treated people like they mattered. You're sabotaging us. Number, I'm existing. I'm responding when people reach out. That's all. You've put us in a vulnerable position. I smiled. You put yourselves there the minute you decided saving $150,000 was worth more than trust, than loyalty, than people. I could hear him swallow on the other end. This isn't personal, Mandy. It was a business decision. And this, I said, is the business consequence. Then I added, calm and quiet, check your email. He paused. What? It should have landed a few minutes ago. He must have pulled it up. I heard the mouse clicking. Then nothing. The email I'd sent was short. Just a list. 38 client names. Each one labeled with a current status. Paused. Reevaluating. No response since handover. Considering external consultant. Already in contact. No threats. No ultimatums. Just data. Reality. Truth. And at the bottom, one line. This is what trust looks like, when it walks away quietly. Back on the line, Jenkins finally spoke. This is coordinated. You're working with someone. I didn't answer. He snapped, You've ruined us. No, I said softly. You did that when you forgot what I was worth. I just let the numbers catch up to the truth. And with that, I ended the call. No screaming, no vengeance speech, just one quiet click. I closed my laptop and sat back. Outside, the leaves were falling slow and golden. The air smelled like November, sharp, smoky, honest. That afternoon, I signed the contract with Veritas. Eli sent back a one-line response. Let's build something better. And we did. Within 6 months, 5 of my old accounts had transitioned to us, legally, willingly. No force, no tricks. Just trust. I never posted anything about what happened. Never named names. I didn't need to. The people who mattered already knew. And the ones who didn't? Well, They were still wondering how everything fell apart so quickly. Let them. Because in the end, I didn't burn the bridge. I rebuilt it somewhere else. And I made damn sure the foundation was stronger this time. At my engagement party, my father raised his glass. I expected him to say something about love, commitment, maybe even how proud he was. Instead, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "You'll never inherit a cent. You're not really mine." The room froze. The clinking of glasses stopped midair. Conversations trailed off mid-sentence. Even the DJ fumbled with the music, and the background melody faded into an awkward silence. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I didn't even lower my own champagne glass. I just smiled. The same smile I'd practiced in the mirror over the years. The one that hid everything I felt. "Since we're revealing family secrets," I said, letting my voice carry just enough to be heard over the stunned quiet, "I have one too." And that's when I reached into my clutch and pulled out a white envelope. From across the table, my stepmother's perfect smile, the one she wore like armor, slipped. Her knuckles went white around the stem of her wine glass. Her eyes darted toward my father, then back to me, calculating, searching. She knew what I had in my hand, but I didn't open it. Not yet. This wasn't the moment to detonate the entire truth. No. This was the moment to plant the fuse. I could feel every pair of eyes in the room on me. Friends, extended family, colleagues from my fiancé's law firm. Some leaned forward, eager for gossip. Others looked uncomfortable, unsure if they should excuse themselves to the restroom or stay for the drama. My fiancé, Daniel, was at my side, his hand resting lightly on my back. I could sense the tension in his fingers. He didn't know the full story yet. Not everything. But he knew enough to trust that I wouldn't do this without a reason. "Don't worry," I said lightly, letting the edge of a smile curve my lips. "We'll get back to dinner soon, but since my father has chosen to update the family record, I think it's only fair that we all leave here tonight knowing the whole truth." There was a murmur. Phones started to come out. The quiet, sneaky kind of recording people do when they think they're being discreet. I caught the faint reflection of red recording lights in the wine glasses. I didn't care. In fact, I counted on it. You might be wondering what kind of person stands in the middle of her own engagement party, in a designer dress under strings of fairy lights and crystal chandeliers, and hints at a scandal big enough to silence an entire banquet hall. The answer is the kind of person who has been pushed to the edge for years. Because that night wasn't just about my father's cruelty. It was about a lifetime of being kept on the outside of the family he built without me. My father, Richard Hayes, had always been a man who loved control more than connection. He was the kind of person who could turn a dinner table into a boardroom without anyone noticing, until you realized you'd just been cross-examined over dessert. When my mother died in a car accident when I was 6, he remarried quickly. Too quickly. 6 months later, Caroline was in our house, rearranging furniture, moving my mother's things into storage, and smiling through every forced introduction. To the outside world, Caroline was perfect. Elegant, gracious, the kind of woman who never had a hair out of place and could charm a room without saying more than 3 sentences. But behind closed doors, she made sure I knew exactly where I stood. "You're lucky your father kept you here," she'd say casually while flipping through glossy magazines in the living room. Most men in his position would have sent you to boarding school. And my father, he never defended me. He'd just adjust his tie and say nothing, as if silence could erase the sting of her words. When I turned 18, I moved out. Got my own place. Worked 2 jobs to put myself through university. I told myself I was free, but in truth, my father's shadow followed me everywhere. In the way people treated me when they realized who my family was. In the way Caroline always seemed to know things about my life she shouldn't have known. The envelope I held that night at my engagement party? I'd been carrying it for weeks. It contained the results of something I'd been quietly investigating for months. A truth that would flip Caroline's carefully crafted image upside down and leave my father with no more illusions about the woman he'd chosen over his own daughter. I hadn't planned to use it at my engagement party. I wanted that night to be about Daniel and me. But when my father decided to humiliate me, to declare in front of everyone that I was not his blood and not his heir, he gave me the stage I didn't even know I'd been waiting for. The air in the room was electric. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. "Laura," my father said, his voice low but sharp. "Put that away. This is not the time." I tilted my head just slightly, the way Caroline always did when she was about to deliver a cutting remark. "Oh, I think it's exactly the time." Gasps rippled across the room. Caroline's hand slipped from her wine glass to her lap where it clenched into a fist. I didn't open the envelope. Not yet. Instead, I slid it back into my clutch and smiled sweetly. "Let's enjoy dinner," I said. "We can talk more after dessert." And just like that, the tension shifted. People sat back down, conversations resumed in low, uneasy murmurs, and the party continued. But every single person in that room knew one thing. Something was coming. And when it did, no one would leave unscathed. People always assume betrayals happen in one explosive moment, that a relationship shatters with a single argument or mistake. But in my family, it didn't happen that way. It started as a quiet erosion. When my mother was alive, our home was warm in ways you can't measure. She had this way of making even ordinary days feel special. Pancakes for dinner when it rained, handwritten notes in my lunchbox, music playing while we cleaned the house together. When she died in that car accident, it was like the color drained out of everything. My father, Richard, didn't cry at the funeral. He stood perfectly straight, jaw tight, shaking hands with people like it was a business meeting. I didn't know it then, but that was his way of surviving, shutting everything out before it could touch him. For 6 months after, it was just the two of us. Dinners were quiet, but I tried to believe we'd find our way back to something like normal. Then Caroline appeared. I first met her in our kitchen. I came home from school to find a stranger in a silk blouse leaning against the counter like she'd always belonged there. She was laughing at something my father said. That laugh that would later grate on me like nails on glass. "Laura," my father said, with a tone so formal it made me straighten up. "This is Caroline. She's a friend." Caroline crouched down to my height, her perfume hitting me before her smile did. "Oh, you're even prettier than Richard described," she said, like she was complimenting a doll she might buy. I remember thinking she was beautiful. Perfectly curled hair, red lipstick that never seemed to smudge, but her eyes didn't match her smile. They were cold, sharp, assessing. Within weeks, she wasn't just visiting. She was staying overnight. A month later, her things were in my mother's closet. By the end of the year, they were married. At first, she tried to win me over. Shopping trips, little gifts, girl time that was really just her parading me around to her friends. But whenever my father wasn't around, the tone shifted. "You should be grateful your father kept you," she'd say offhandedly while flipping through a fashion magazine. "Other men would have sent you away." I'd laugh like it was a joke, but my stomach always tightened. Over time, the house changed. The walls that had been lined with family photos of my mother and me were replaced with glossy portraits of Caroline and my father, staged like magazine spreads. My mother's favorite armchair was sent to storage. The kitchen that used to smell like cinnamon and fresh bread now smelled like whatever expensive candles Caroline ordered in bulk. But the biggest change wasn't in the decor. It was in my father. He'd always been reserved, but now he seemed absent. When I tried to talk about school or my friends, he'd nod politely, like a stranger making conversation on a train. When I got into the debate club, he congratulated me as though I'd gotten a small promotion at work. Caroline, meanwhile, had mastered the art of exclusion. Dinner conversations revolved around her social calendar, her charity work, her friends' vacation homes. I learned to sit quietly, to fade into the background, because any attempt to join in was met with a polite but firm, "That's not really relevant, dear." When I turned 18, I moved into a small apartment across town. My father didn't protest. Caroline congratulated me like I'd gotten a job in another city. "Independence is good for you," she said. "Besides, you can't live off your father forever." I worked part-time at a cafe while studying business administration at the local university. I rarely saw them, except for holidays or the occasional formal dinner. Those dinners were always the same. Caroline playing hostess, my father making polite conversation, me counting the minutes until I could leave. Then, 2 years ago, I noticed something. It was at a charity gala Caroline had organized. I was there mostly out of obligation, wearing a dress I couldn't afford, but needed to look appropriate. As she worked the room, I watched her charm donors laugh a little too long at certain men's jokes, lean in just a little too close. It wasn't unusual. Caroline was a flirt. But that night, I saw her with someone I recognized. A man named Thomas Bennett, a wealthy real estate developer my father had done business with for years. They slipped out to the balcony together, laughing. 10 minutes later, they returned, both of them flushed. My father didn't notice, or didn't care. I did. That night planted a seed of suspicion I couldn't shake. Over the months that followed, I started noticing patterns. The way Caroline's lunches with friends often coincided with Thomas's trips into the city. The late-night phone calls she took in the study with the door closed. The unexplained jewelry that appeared without occasion. I didn't have proof, but I had a feeling. And feelings, I've learned, are where all great revenge stories begin. By the time Daniel proposed to me, I had almost let it go. My life was moving forward. I was building something separate from my father and Caroline's world. But then, Caroline started inserting herself into my wedding plans, making choices for me, inviting people I'd never met, dismissing my ideas with that sweet, poisonous smile. I realized then that I wasn't free of her. Not really. She still saw me as something to control, or erase. So I started digging, quietly, methodically, and when I finally found what I was looking for, I put it in an envelope. The same envelope I carried into my engagement party. The same one that made her smile vanish the moment she saw it. If there's one thing I learned from growing up with Caroline, it's that she underestimated me. She thought I was quiet, that I kept my head down because I was timid. But really, I was observing. And if you watch people long enough, they always reveal themselves. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd stopped by my father's house to drop off some engagement party invitations in person. Caroline was supposed to be out for her standing lunch with a friend named Melissa. Her calendar was always packed with those lunches. Too many, in fact, for someone who never seemed to know much about Melissa when I asked. I pulled into the driveway and noticed her car wasn't there. Inside, the house was quiet, but on the kitchen counter was a small jewelry box. The lid was open, revealing a diamond bracelet. It wasn't my father's style. Too flashy, too modern. The receipt was still inside. Paid for by T. Bennett, Thomas Bennett. I stood there staring at the receipt, my mind spinning. Maybe it was a gift for a charity auction. Maybe my father had asked him to pick it up. I could have believed that, if I hadn't also noticed the date and time. 2 days earlier, exactly when Caroline had claimed to be getting her nails done. From that point on, I stopped trying to convince myself there was nothing going on. I needed to know, and I knew better than to confront her without proof. The next week, I made sure to be in the neighborhood during one of her lunch dates. I parked across from the restaurant she'd named my father, but she never showed up. Instead, at exactly 12:15, I saw her walk out of the parking garage 2 blocks away, wearing sunglasses even though it was overcast, and slide into a black Mercedes that pulled up beside her. Thomas Bennett was driving. I stayed far enough behind to avoid being noticed. They drove across town to the Lakeshore Hotel, one of those 5-star places with private entrances. They didn't come out for 2 hours. I wish I could say I felt shocked. But mostly, I felt this heavy, sinking confirmation, like the answer to a question I'd been avoiding was finally too loud to ignore. And I decided then, if Caroline was going to blow up my family again, it would be on my terms. I started small. Whenever I visited my father, I'd excuse myself to make a call and walk past Caroline's study. She guarded that room like a fortress, but she was careless about leaving things on her desk. One afternoon, I spotted a folded receipt from a boutique hotel in the city. Same initials, TB, same pattern. Another time, I caught her on the phone in the garden, laughing in that way she only did with Thomas. She didn't see me, or maybe she didn't care. I began taking photos, quietly, methodically. A blurry shot of her getting into Thomas's car, a close-up of the hotel receipt, screenshots of public posts from Thomas's social media that matched her lunch days exactly. Him in a lobby, her mysteriously unavailable. The most damning evidence came by accident. One Saturday, my father asked me to drop off some files at the house while he was at a golf tournament. Caroline was out of town visiting her sister. Except when I pulled into the driveway, Thomas's Mercedes was parked at the side of the house. I killed my engine and sat there for a moment, heart pounding. Through the living room window, I could see them. Caroline leaning against the back of the couch, Thomas close enough to touch her hair. He said something that made her laugh and swatted his arm. That was when my stomach turned, because she wasn't just wearing any outfit. She was wearing my mother's silk scarf, the one that had been lost years ago. That scarf made it personal. I took a photo through the gap in the curtains. My hands were shaking, but I made sure it was clear. Caroline's face, Thomas's face, the scarf, it wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about disrespect, about erasing my mother's place in our family piece by piece. After that, I went further. I asked a friend who worked in admin at a private lab if they could quietly run a paternity test if I brought in samples. She raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions when I explained it was for family peace of mind. I didn't have children of my own, but Caroline had a son with my father, James. He was 12, quiet, a little shy. I'd always liked him. And for years, I'd heard whispers about how much he looked like an old friend of Caroline's. I hated myself for even considering it. But if Caroline had lied about one thing, who was to say where the lies ended? I waited until James stayed with me one weekend when my father and Caroline were in Milan. I collected a used straw from his juice box. Later, I borrowed a comb from my father's bathroom. 2 weeks later, the results came back. Not a match. When I saw the envelope with the results, my hands went cold. I'd gone looking for proof of an affair and found something bigger. Something that would blow apart every illusion my father had about his marriage and about his own child. That envelope was the same one I carried into my engagement party. And I knew, deep down, that Caroline saw it not as paper, but as a loaded weapon. Dinner tasted like nothing. I chewed, nodded at compliments about the centerpieces, laughed when people made small talk about venues and cake flavors, and all the while I felt the envelope against my ribs like a second heartbeat. The fairy lights over the garden buzzed softly. A breeze lifted the hems of dresses and carried whispers from table to table. Daniel leaned in. "You don't have to do this tonight," he murmured, fingers lacing with mine under the table. "I didn't plan to," I said, but he chose the timing. Across the lawn, my father held court at a cluster of tables. Chin high, cufflinks shining, telling a story about a merger everyone had already read in the paper. Caroline stood half a step behind him, one hand on his shoulder, the other around a glass of Sauvignon Blanc she barely touched. She laughed at all the right moments. Her smile had recovered, but it never reached her eyes. Every few minutes, she flicked her gaze toward me, checking that the envelope was still real, that this wasn't a bluff I'd put away during the main course. The band switched from jazz to something slower. The servers cleared plates. Dessert, pistachio semi-freddo with raspberries, arrived like a peace offering I didn't accept. The DJ tapped the mic. "We'll open the floor for toasts in a few minutes. If anyone would like to—" "I would," I said, standing. My chair scraped lightly on the flagstone. Conversations dimmed, then softened into the expectant hush of an audience that senses a twist coming and can't stop watching. Daniel squeezed my hand once, then let go. "I'm here," he whispered. I crossed the lawn, the train of my dress whispering behind me. When I reached the mic, I didn't look at my father first. I looked at my guests, my friends, Daniel's colleagues, neighbors from my building, a handful of relatives who still used holiday cards to communicate. The people who knew pieces of me, but not the whole. Thank you all for being here. I began steady. Tonight is supposed to be about love and beginnings, and it still is. But before we go any further, I need to correct the record. A ripple moved through the crowd. The fairy lights reflected as tiny constellations in the glasses. My father, I said, finally meeting Richard's eyes, announced earlier that I'm not really his and that I'll never inherit a cent. He chose a public setting to say something private. I won't match his cruelty, but I won't pretend it didn't happen. Caroline stepped forward a fraction, manicured fingers tightening on his shoulder. Laura, I'll be brief, I said, and the softness in my voice quieted the murmurs. First, biology doesn't make a family. Care does. Showing up does. Keeping promises does. My mother, Ava, did all of that. I am her daughter in every way that counts. I let that settle. A few heads nodded. Daniel's mother, my university friend Maya, even the florist who'd stayed to pack up later. Second, I continued, turning slightly toward Caroline. Since we're revealing family secrets, I want clarity, not spectacle. So I'll show this. I lifted the envelope. And then I'm asking you all for one thing. Kindness to a child who didn't choose any of this. Caroline's smile broke, like glass under pressure. I slid the documents out, not with a flourish, but with the practical movement of a person filing a report. These are hotel receipts and photographs, I said, placing the images on the cocktail table beside the mic, face down. They show repeated meetings between Caroline and Thomas Bennett over the last year, dates that align with times she told my father she was at lunches or salon appointments. There's also a gift receipt, bracelet, diamonds, purchased by Mr. Bennett and delivered to our home. I didn't lift the photos. I didn't need to. I don't need to describe the images. They speak. A hush fell so complete I could hear the paper settle. My father stared at the envelope as though it had grown teeth. And this, I said, lifting the second sheet, is a laboratory report. I obtained it because rumors had been used as weapons in my family for years, and I wanted truth. It is not a toy. It is not for social media. It says that my father is not the biological parent of Caroline's son. A single breath, pulled in by dozens of people at once, became a wind. I kept my voice level. James is 12. He is gentle and he loves chess and science fiction and blueberry pancakes. This is not his fault. If you take anything from tonight, let it be that. Do not punish a child for the lies of adults. From somewhere, a fork clinked against a plate. No one moved to pick it up. Caroline found her voice first. You had no right, she said, throat tight. This is a private matter. You violated... I protected myself, I said, from being erased, from being told again that I don't belong in the family my mother built. I didn't publish anything. I didn't send it to reporters. I came to the people whose trust has been traded like currency at this table for years and said, stop lying to each other. My father's jaw worked as if he were chewing gravel. Laura, he said, and I had to look at him then, because it was both my name and a question. When? When you chose Caroline's image over my reality, I said simply. When it became clear that the silence you called dignity had become complicity. He stared at the papers but didn't touch them. Behind him, two of his partners from the firm avoided each other's eyes. Thomas Bennett was not present. Conveniently, in Boston. The space where his place card sat at our table felt suddenly loud. Caroline took a breath and tried for softness. Richard, this is a misunderstanding. She's misread. Don't, I said. Not sharp, but final. Please don't make me recite dates and rooms and times in front of my friends and his colleagues and my grandmother's bridge partner. Don't make me name the scarf you wore while you stood in my mother's living room with someone who wasn't your husband. Caroline's face drained. Somewhere near the back, a woman whispered, "Oh," and then nothing else. I turned back to the mic, my hands steady now that the worst was said. "I'm not here for money. Keep the trust. Keep the house. Keep the foundation and the board seats and the china. I'm here to draw a line between truth and performance. I am marrying a man who knows me. I intend to have a life where love is not a weapon and secrets are not currency." I looked at my father. "You hurt me tonight. You've hurt me for years by standing still while other people acted. If you want to fix it, start with James. Tell him the truth. Gently, with help. He deserves certainty more than anyone here." Silence held for 3 long beats. Then Daniel walked up, not to shield me, but to stand beside me. Equal. He set a hand on the small of my back. "We'd like to invite everyone to give us a few minutes," he said into the mic, voice calm. "Please enjoy coffee inside. We'll rejoin you soon." Chairs scraped. A tide of guests moved toward the house, some glancing back, most grateful for instructions. When the lawn thinned to family, I lowered the mic and faced them without its protection. "I won't discuss the documents further tonight," I said. "There are lawyers and therapists for that, but the pretending ends here." My father looked older than he had an hour ago. He nodded once, a small, broken movement. "I hear you," he said, voice rough. "For the first time, I think." Caroline opened her mouth, closed it, then picked up her clutch. She walked past me without a word. Her heels sounded like a metronome counting down a song that had finally ended. I exhaled. The fairy lights hummed. Somewhere inside, the band started playing again. Slower, kinder. Daniel's fingers threaded through mine. "It's still our engagement party," he said softly. "It is," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "And it's the first honest one I've ever been to." I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating itself off the nightstand. For a second, I didn't know what day it was. Then my body remembered before my brain did. A knot low in my stomach, the taste of adrenaline that hadn't fully left. Missed calls. My father, twice. A text from Daniel already at the office. "Coffee on your counter. I'm a call away." A message from an unknown number that only said, "You went too far." I blocked it without replying. I stood in the quiet of our kitchen, hands wrapped around the warm mug, and replayed the garden lights, the hush, Caroline's face when I mentioned the scarf. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like removing a splinter you'd been pretending wasn't there. Relief edged with soreness. At 8:12 a.m., my father called again. I let it ring twice, then picked up. "Laura," he said, voice hoarse. "I need your help." There were 1,000 ways I could have answered. Now you call. I'm not your assistant. Ask your wife. But none of them would help the only person who didn't deserve any of this. "Is this about James?" I asked. "Yes." A pause. I don't know where to start. He's at school. Caroline didn't come home." I closed my eyes. "We shouldn't tell him alone. He'll need a safe place and someone trained to guide the conversation." "I already called Dr. Patel," he said quickly, as if afraid I'd hang up. "From the family center you volunteer at. She said she could see us this afternoon if you come." I stared at the steam lifting off my coffee. "I'll be there," I said. "Thank you," he whispered, and in that single word I heard something I hadn't heard from him in years. Humility. The hours between the call and the appointment stretched like rubber. I worked from our small dining table, taking 2 client calls that I barely remember. At 11, Daniel came home with sandwiches we didn't touch. "You don't have to carry all of them," he said gently, thumb brushing my wrist. "I don't," I said. "Just this one." At 2:45, I pulled into the lot outside the family center. It smelled like temper paint and hand sanitizer and the faint sweetness of the bakery next door. I'd sat with dozens of kids here, listened while they tried to give shape to feelings too big for their bodies. It felt different to arrive as family. My father was already in the lobby, suit wrinkled, eyes raw. He stood when he saw me and for a second looked like he might hug me, then thought better of it and shoved his hands in his pockets. We didn't do hugs yet. Maybe someday. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I'm here for James," I said, and watched the flinch ripple across his face. Then I softened. "And for you if you listen." He nodded, too fast. James arrived with the after-school bus, backpack slung over one shoulder, hair sticking to his forehead under a too-big hoodie. He brightened when he saw me. "Laura, did you bring the new chess book?" I swallowed. "Next time, buddy. We're going to talk with Dr. Patel today, okay? All of us." His eyes flicked from me to my father and back again, reading the room with the quick intuition of a kid who learned early to measure weather by adult faces. "Am I in trouble?" "No," I said immediately. "You didn't do anything wrong." Inside Dr. Patel's office, the walls were covered in drawings and a dry erase board with the words, "Feelings don't make you bad," in neat handwriting. She was small, with calm eyes and the kind of voice that turned panic into sentences. We sat in a loose circle. My father couldn't quite look at James, so he looked at me. I shook my head once. "Not me." Dr. Patel caught the movement, then addressed my father without judgment. "Richard, you asked for this. You can begin. I'm here to help you say it clearly and kindly." He took a breath that sounded like it hurt. "James," he said, turning to him, "I love you. That is true in every way that matters. I am your dad by choice and by every day we've spent together. That will not change." His voice wavered. "But there is something about your biology I didn't know and just learned." James's hands stilled on the strap of his backpack. "What do you mean?" Dr. Patel leaned in slightly. "Sometimes adults find out new information about families. It can be scary, but it doesn't change who shows up for you." My father swallowed. "I learned that I'm not your biological father." For a second, James's face went blank, and I remembered science lessons, the way kids categorize the world. Then he frowned. "So, am I adopted?" "No," my father said quickly. "I signed all your birth papers. I've raised you since the day you were born. That's still true. But biologically, your mother and I need to talk to you about who your biological father is." James stared at his shoes. "Is it someone I know?" His voice was small. My father glanced at me, then back at Dr. Patel. She nodded, giving him the script and the choice at the same time. "We don't have all the answers yet," he said carefully. "We need to talk to your mom. But you didn't do anything wrong. You are loved. By me. By your sister. That's real." James's eyes filled, and he blinked hard like he was trying to force the tears back where they came from. I moved my chair closer but didn't touch him until he leaned into me first. Then I wrapped an arm around his shoulders, the way I'd wished someone had done for me at 12 when the world felt fragile and loud. Dr. Patel walked us through concrete next steps, names of a child therapist James could see weekly, a suggestion that we not remove routines, that we add check-ins every night, that school be notified only if James wanted support. "Keep his world as predictable as you can," she said to my father. "Tell the truth in age-appropriate pieces, and answer questions as they come. Don't flood him." When we stood to leave, James tugged my sleeve. "Are you still my sister?" he asked, eyes searching mine. "Yes," I said, and if my voice cracked, no one corrected me. Always. Outside in the pale winter sun, my father stopped beside my car. "Thank you," he said again, quieter. "You were right about doing this with help. I would have made a mess of it." I leaned on the roof, keys in my hand. "You can make a lot of mistakes and still be a good parent if you keep choosing the child," I said. "Keep doing that." He nodded, then winced. "Caroline called," he said. "From a hotel. She wants to talk privately. Her lawyer emailed too." Of course he did. Of course she did. You need your own counsel, I said. Someone who represents you, not the firm, not your pride. I hesitated. And Dad? Don't let her blame you into silence. If you're tempted to protect her image, remember who pays the cost. He closed his eyes like the light hurt. I won't. A beat. Can I call you after I speak with her? The question was so simple and so new that I felt the sting behind my eyes before I could stop it. Yes, I said. Within reason. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're scaffolding. He almost smiled. You sound like your mother. I stared at him. Which one? Ava, he said, certainty anchoring the name. The one who taught both of us how to be decent. That night, the house was a mess of quiet. Daniel made pasta and oversalted it, and we ate every bite like we were grateful to be home. I answered 3 texts from cousins who had been at the party, each some version of, "Are you okay?" I ignored one from a number that looked like it belonged to Thomas Bennett's office. At 9 p.m., my father called. I told Caroline I want a separation. He said without preamble. I asked her to move out. She objected. I told her we'll discuss terms through lawyers. That's good, I said, and meant it. How's James? Asleep on the couch. He asked if I would read him the first chapter of The Hobbit. We haven't done that since he was 9. His voice softened. He asked if you'd come by Saturday. I told him I'd ask. I will, I said. Bring blueberries. We'll make pancakes. After we hung up, I stood at the sink and watched our reflections in the dark window. Me, older than I felt. Daniel behind me, steady as a lighthouse. He slid his arms around my waist and rested his chin on my shoulder. What's the headline for today? He asked. I thought about it. Truth told without spectacle, I said, and a kid went to sleep knowing he was loved. That's a good day, he said. It is, I said. And for the first time since the party, I believed it. Real life doesn't resolve itself in one grand scene. It unspools in emails, court dates, voicemail messages you rehearse 10 times before returning, and grocery lists with eggs, detergent, call therapist written between them. The week after the engagement party, Caroline moved into a serviced apartment near the river. She sent a single text. You humiliated me, then forwarded me a letter from her attorney requesting that I preserve all materials. I replied with our counsel's information and turned off read receipts. That became a theme. Answer what requires answering. Starve what only wants a reaction. My father retained his own lawyer, someone from outside the firm to avoid conflicts. Within a month, he filed for legal separation and requested a court-ordered paternity test for James. The private lab report I'd obtained gave us direction. The court-ordered test gave it standing. The result matched the first. Not a biological parent. James's therapist suggested a careful plan for disclosure beyond what we'd already done. He'd meet with his school counselor once a week, keep routines steady, limit exposure to adult conversations, and, if he wished, have a supervised introduction to his biological father. He did not wish. Maybe later, he said, forehead pressed to my shoulder. When I feel solid again. Thomas Bennett, for his part, attempted to manage the situation like a press crisis. He issued a statement calling the matter deeply personal and private, and clarified that he had always respected the Hayes family. He did not deny paternity. He did not claim it either. His lawyers reached out to my father's lawyers behind closed doors. I didn't ask for details. I only asked whether James's needs remained at the center. My father said yes, and for once, his actions matched his words. The separation became a divorce petition by spring. Caroline's counsel fought hard on optics. Photos from charity events, testimonials about her role as a supportive spouse. The paper record said one thing. The receipts and hotel logs said another. I didn't testify. I didn't need to. The case wasn't about me, and inserting myself would have fed the performance I was trying to end. Meanwhile, our wedding crept closer. Not the spectacle Caroline had once tried to produce, but a small ceremony under maple trees in a park we could walk to. We chose a string trio over a band, handwritten vows over scripted toasts. My dress was simple, pockets deep enough to hold lip balm and a folded note of my mother's recipe for blueberry pancakes that I carried like a talisman. 2 months before the ceremony, my father asked to meet for coffee. He arrived early, hair a little overgrown, suit pressed but lived in. He placed a white envelope on the table between us. "I made a mistake once, starting a conversation with you through money," he said. "This isn't that, it's paperwork." He slid it closer. Healthcare proxy, emergency contact forms, a letter to James's school authorizing you to pick him up anytime. It seemed small, but to him, it matters. I signed. It did matter. Small, practical kindnesses often do more than grand speeches ever could. He didn't bring up the engagement party. He didn't apologize theatrically. He said what he'd done wrong in clean sentences and then followed those sentences with acts. On Tuesdays, he took James to chess club and let him lose without fixing it. On Thursdays, he left work early, cooked dinner, badly at first, better with practice, and asked questions that weren't depositions. On Sundays, they planted herbs in mismatched pots on the kitchen sill and named them ridiculous things. Sir Basil, Queen Mint, because laughter helps things grow. I stayed in my lane, sister, not savior, advocate, not arbiter. I learned to say, I can help with that, and just as important, that's not mine to carry. Boundaries stopped feeling like walls and started feeling like door frames, places you pass through with intention. Caroline requested unsupervised time with James. His therapist recommended a gradual schedule. Short visits in public places first, no overnight stays until trust rebuilt, no introductions to new friends without discussion. Caroline agreed on paper, but in practice she struggled. The first time she saw him, she brought gifts he didn't want and asked questions he couldn't answer. When he cried, she panicked, called him ungrateful, then cried too. Progress came later, in smaller ways. A quiet hour at the library, a walk where she listened more than she spoke. A text afterwards that didn't ask for anything in return. Healing rarely looks like triumph. It looks like people trying again without demanding applause. As for Thomas, months passed before he asked to meet James with the therapist present. They sat in a room with soft chairs and a box of tissues, 3 people and a facilitator. James looked at his shoes and then at my father, who gave a small nod that meant you choose. He chose to stay for 15 minutes. They talked about science fiction. When time was up, James said he wasn't ready for more. Thomas, for once, didn't push. I marked that restraint as the first decent choice I'd seen him make. The divorce finalized in early summer. There was no dramatic courthouse scene, just an email with a PDF and a message from my father. It's done. The settlement was standard for our state: equitable division, spousal support for a period, a parenting plan anchored to James's schedule. My father offered to keep the house only if James wanted it. He did, mostly for the kitchen sill and the chessboard. Caroline kept her river apartment and most of the art she'd chosen. My mother's scarf came back in a box without a note. I didn't take it inside. I stood on our stoop and tied it to the maple that shades our building, a flag for something survived. On our wedding day, the sky threatened rain and then changed its mind. Daniel stood under the maple trees, nervous in a way that made his jokes worse and his face softer. My father asked if he could walk me down the aisle. I said no, but asked if he'd meet me halfway. He did. We took 6 steps together, and at step 7, I let go. Not because I was angry, but because that's where the symbolism ended and my life began. We didn't do a bouquet toss or a garter. Instead, we set a small table with framed photos, my mother holding me at 2, my father reading to James under a blanket fort, Daniel with his grandmother making pierogi. We asked guests to write 1 true sentence on a card and hang it from twine between 2 trees. By the end of the night, the lines sagged with honest words. I am trying again. I am afraid and showing up anyway. I forgive myself for not knowing sooner. When the music quieted and the park emptied, my father approached, hands in his pockets. "Laura," he said, and the word didn't feel like a question anymore. You look like your mother. I hope so, I said. I mean in the way you stand in a room, he added, like you'll stay upright even if the wind shifts. We didn't say much else. Some things are better lived than discussed. James came over the next morning and flipped pancakes while Daniel pretended to supervise. We ate on the floor because all the chairs were covered in jackets and flowers. Mid-bite, James looked up. When I'm older, he said, blueberry on his chin, I want to do what you do. Burn pancakes? I asked. He shook his head, grinning. Tell the truth and still make breakfast. That, in the end, is the message I carried out of this story. Revenge that doesn't protect someone is just theater. The only version that lasts is boundary setting tied to care, truth told without spectacle, and decisions that keep the most vulnerable person in the room at the center. I didn't get an inheritance. I didn't want one. I got something better. A family made on purpose. A father learning late but sincerely, a brother asleep on a couch after chess club, and a home where secrets have nowhere to grow. If you're standing where I stood, on the edge of revealing a truth that could break things, ask yourself the only question that matters. Who will be safer if I say this out loud? Lead with that. Let the rest take the time it needs.